You know, it's an amazing thing, my friends, Mr. and Mrs. America out there. You know, in that 2016 Republican primary, what were there, 15, 16 candidates? It was brutal. Some were more effective than others. You had Rubio in there. You had Rand Paul, Mike Huckabee, Ted Cruz, of course, and many others. I've known Ted Cruz a long time. He is a fantastic individual, great conservative. When Ted Cruz decided to run for the Senate, he came up to me at an event. I had no idea he wanted to do that. He'd never run for office before, and he came up, he said, "Mark, I want to run for the Senate in Texas." I said, "Well, good for you." He said, "No, you don't understand. I would like your support." I said, "Well, you got it." So in this program, he had our full support. I spoke to Rush and Sean, and they gave him full support. Sarah Palin gave him full support. The conservative movement got behind Ted Cruz. He won a primary nobody thought he could win against the lieutenant governor, who was a very wealthy man. Ted wasn't holding any office. And he won the general election. He's been a fantastic senator ever since, hasn't he? Decided he wanted to run for the presidency. Rubio decided he wanted to run. Others did too. In the case of Rubio in Florida, I wasn't really following that race, but it was pretty packed, the Republican primary. Rubio, I believe, had been the Speaker of the House down there in Florida, and he wanted to move to the Senate. Most of the people in the conservative movement had no idea, of course, who Marco Rubio was. People I know and trust in Florida told me he was the guy. I brought him on this radio program and I interviewed him. And I found him to be very impressive. He was at about 5%, definitely under 10% in the polls in the Republican primary, and we endorsed him. And he shot up to about 35%, if I recall. These were Tea Party candidates. Tea Party candidates that were riding the wave of the Tea Party revolution, of which we were a major part here on this program with my book, Liberty and Tyranny. So many great Tea Party groups. In response to Obama and in response to George W. Bush. As of today, you won't believe this, Rubio doesn't talk to this program. Now, we haven't invited him in months, but I gave up. And I suspect that's due in part because we backed Ted Cruz in that Republican primary. Maybe there's some other reasons. I don't really care. I don't really know. He's been a very good Secretary of State. That's all I care about. There was later a battle in Utah to remove a sitting senator with a Tea Party candidate. The sitting senator's name was Robert Bennett. His father had been a senator. The name was well known. I considered him to be part of the Republican establishment. And there was a young guy who wanted to be a senator. He hadn't served in any other office before either, a citizen candidate. And his name was Mike Lee. We swung behind Mike Lee, even though it was a convention process. We urged our fellow conservatives and Reaganites to get behind him. And he won. Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. And there were others. There were others. Why am I telling you this? Because in the Republican primary for president, I supported Ted Cruz. Despite all the rewrite of history, Rush Limbaugh was very favorable to Ted Cruz, but he also liked Trump. I also liked Trump too, but I didn't know him. I wasn't sure who he really was. As soon as the primary was over, I had alerted Rush and Sean that I was going to back Trump, that I was going to bring as many of my fellow conservatives to back him as possible. The president knows that as well, and that's exactly what we did. There was a 24-hour period, which people keep seizing on, of course, in which I declared I was a never-Trumper, because I got furious. I don't even know what the reason was with Roger Stone. And I assumed he was a consultant to Donald Trump. Candidate Trump called me on the phone and said, "Why did you declare yourself that way, Mark?" I said, "Because this, that, and the other." He said, "Well, it's not accurate. Roger's a friend, but he's not my consultant." So the next day on radio, I said, "Well, I withdraw the never-Trumper." My daughter was a Trump supporter from day one. My brother-in-law was a Trump supporter from day one. So we didn't have anything against Donald Trump. I did have something against some of the other candidates. I didn't know him. Ted put up a hell of a fight, didn't he? So I endorsed Donald Trump before the Republican convention. And we've been dear, close friends ever since. Ever since. We pulled all the conservatives we could to get behind Donald Trump. Now, I'm telling you this for a reason. I tell you all these things for a reason. There is a difference between having a different opinion on a policy, legitimately so, thinking independently, and voicing that difference in a respectful way, and stabbing somebody in the back. There are people now who claim that you voted for Donald Trump because of them, that you would never voted for Donald Trump except for them, that they are the true power behind the movement, the MAGA movement, that they created support for the MAGA movement in the Latino community, in the black community, in the Jewish community, in the women community, among blue-collar workers and union members, and on and on and on, that they're responsible for all the victories that Donald Trump achieved, and that he wouldn't be where he is but for them. Now, the truth is, of the 77 million people who voted for Donald Trump, the vast majority of these people, you don't even know who those people are. You don't listen to their podcasts. You don't subscribe to them. You don't go to their seminars and their annual meetings, and you don't care. But most of them are in or around Washington, or they have influence in and around Washington. They network with the government, in the government, even though they pretend to be anti-government. And they are self-proclaimed, as most narcissists are, as both righteous and influencers. In this relatively small cabal, they interview each other, they quote each other, they promote each other. And they claim that each other is responsible for this great Trump revolution. Almost none of them were involved in the Tea Party movement. Almost none of them are involved in the Convention of States movement. Almost none of them have ever organized a damn thing. They've ever said anything profound or important. But they want you to know that they're the reason that Donald Trump is president. I've never said such a thing. I've always said you're the reason that Donald Trump is president. You. You did this. I'm just a facilitator. You did this. Now, why does that matter? Because these people are stabbing the president in the back. Right now, as I speak, he stands up against the Islamists who want to destroy us. They stand with the Islamists, even though they pretend otherwise. He stands up for the United States and the United States military, facing down tonight the Russians, who have made threats against us repeatedly. Standing face to face with the Islamo-Nazi regime in Tehran, who've made threats against us repeatedly. They've undermined him every step of the way. They stab him in the back. They say they have a new idea on foreign policy, which is appeasement, surrender. Nothing new about that. And nothing good about it either. They're very active as I speak. They want you to believe that you, the Maga movement, you, the 77 million, that you've turned on the state of Israel and now you support Hamas, that you blame the Israelis for the starvation and the death that Hamas has unleashed in both Israel and the Gaza Strip. They say that's your position. They say you are becoming more and more anti-Semitic with each passing day. That MAGA is turning against the Jews in Israel, and I guess the Christians and Gentiles, other Gentiles who support them. Even though the polls show otherwise, it doesn't matter. They're telling you that the young people, particularly the males, stand with them. This is more projection. More projection than it is reality. This is what they're pursuing. This is what they want. Because they have a lot in common, this whole negative power issue, with Bernie Sanders, with Mondani. They've had, in fact, have more in common with them than they do with you and me. How many of you think that Churchill was the devil during World War II and Hitler was misunderstood? That's what they believe. How many of you think it would have been okay if the Islamo-Nazi regime in Iran had nuclear warheads? It's none of our business, even though they're building intercontinental ballistic missiles. Well, we know that over 90% of you don't agree with that, but that's their position. That's their position. How many of you think the Epstein matter is the most important matter in the country? And yet they won't tell us why. Why is the Epstein matter the most important matter in the country? Does it reveal something about Donald Trump? Obviously not, because they didn't reveal it when the Democrats had the quote-unquote files. Does it reveal something about a certain Democrat in any significant way? Obviously not, at least not yet. They haven't released it. There's no evidence of anything other than the guy was a serial rapist and got what he deserved at his own hand, apparently. And so we should stab Donald Trump in the back because his administration didn't come up with something really cool, really compelling, really brutal. Seems to be the Joe Rogan argument these days, who's stabbing the president in the back left and right. Tarlson, who's stabbing the president in the back left and right. And others, who I shall name at some point. We stand with the president, you and I. We know what battle is taking place in this country between good and evil and right and wrong, between negative power and positive power. We see Mondani. We see Omar. We see Tlaib. We see AOC. And scores of other. In the Democrat Party, we see Bernie Sanders. We see them all. We see what the Islamists want and what they're doing to destroy the Judeo-Christian faith system to destroy the West, to destroy our colleges and universities. We see it. We're not stupid. We see what's happened to Europe. Europe has been conquered in many respects. Paris and London and Toronto to the north of us. And we want nothing to do with it. Donald Trump fights it. Donald Trump has secured the border. Donald Trump is trying to reindustrialize America. Donald Trump is trying to build back our military. Donald Trump backs the blue, local and federal law enforcement. Donald Trump is trying to reduce the size of the central government, both in the amount of money it spends and in the number of employees it hires. This is a good man who's done more conservative things than almost any Republican president in your lifetime. So those who stab him in the back, those who work with the radical left media, those who collude with the people who are undermining this republic, they're not friends of ours. They're not influencers. They're bastards.